This evening. We are studying in the book of Job, and we are down to Job chapter 29. We are going to begin in the midst of Job's final speech, a 6-chapter speech that Job gives as he closes out his discussion with his three friends. We've already seen in chapters 26, 27, and 28, Job describing God's power and God's glory, and that has been a recurring theme in these discussions that Job has had with his three friends. But Job makes a specific point about God's power and God's glory. And the point is in chapter 27, and that is you don't want to mess with God's glory and God's power. You don't want to get on God's bad side. You don't want to receive God's wrath. And his point to his three friends is that the things that they have said that have really been blasphemous against Job, they have, as God will point out later on, they have sinned against Job in the things that they have accused him of with absolutely no proof whatsoever. Everything is speculation that they are saying, even though they are saying some things that are true about God and about wickedness and about the importance of righteousness. They have misapplied those things to Job. And Job's response to them in verse 27, or chapter 27 is, you better be careful about that. In chapter 28, he speaks of the surpassing value of wisdom. Men will dig holes and work hard, work their fingers to the bones, put themselves in great danger to gain gold and silver and jewels and things of that nature, things that have no eternal consequence to them at all. And yet wisdom is crying out in the streets to be heard. And men ignore it to their eternal condemnation. So that's chapters 26, 27, and 28. A stern warning to Job's friends. Part 2 of Job's speech gets a lot more personal. As he describes in chapter 29 the life that he used to have, chapter 30, what is true of his life now, in chapter 31, some points about if he has in fact done wrong things, then he accepts whatever punishment that it is that comes his way, but with the understanding that in his mind he has done nothing that has been worthy of what he sees as God's fierce attack upon him. So we get into it in chapter 29. It's a kind of a walk down memory lane for Job and these three friends as Job describes how he used to live, what his life used to be like. And what his life used to be like was that he was a man of great honor. He was wealthy. God had blessed him richly, and as are more important to him than that, and really because of that, he describes the honor that was bestowed upon him by his fellow man. Verses 1 through 6, he wishes that things could be like they were back then. Oh, that I were as in months past, as in the days when God watched over me, when his lamp shone upon my head, when by his light I walked through darkness, just as I was in the days of my prime, when the friendly counsel of God was over my tent, when the Almighty was yet with me, when my children were around me, when my steps were bathed with cream, and the rock poured out rivers of oil for me. And so Job understands how blessed his life was, and he understands why his life was blessed. He understands understood who the source of his blessing was, and that source was God. I like that there in verse 6. My steps were bathed with cream. I've got a friend who lives in Tennessee, Alabama now, and his speech is filled with Alabama-isms and Tennessee-isms. I'll ask him how you're doing. He's fine as frog hair, and a lot of times he'll say, "I'm just swimming in a tub of butter," and that means he's doing really, really good. Did you hear that one in Alabama? And I think that's what Job is saying in verse 6, and I wonder if that's not where that saying came from. How you doing, Job? Well, I was bathing in cream, and oil was just like it was pouring out the rocks for me. He was a blessed man. And he was an honored man. In verse 7, when I went out to the gate by the city, when I took my seat in the open square, the gate of the city in the open square is where not only business was conducted, but judgments were made. Job is a successful businessman, and he is honored in the open square as a businessman. He is honored at the gate. I'm going to be coughing tonight, and some of those will be extended coughs. So they will end, but you may have to tolerate me for 10 or 15 seconds while I go through that. I do have water. But the gate of the city was where men would go for judgments to be made. It's a fascinating look at life in Job's time, especially if we are correct that Job lived sometime before the time of Abraham. And I think that is most likely when he lived. It's a fascinating look at the society of that day. Men didn't just live out on a farm somewhere, some did. But men dwelt in cities, and there was a social structure involved in that. And there were men who were highly honored because of the life that they lived, and they were looked up to for guidance in guiding the city in the way that the city ought to go. And so Job was one of those kind of guys. He sat at the city gate, and he sat in the open square and conducted business and pronounced pronounced judgments. And look at what verse 8 says, how people reacted when Job entered the room. When you like this, guys, the young men saw me and hid. The aged arose and stood. The princes refrained from talking and put their hand on their mouth. The voice of the nobles was hushed, and their tongue stuck to the root of their mouth. When the ear heard, then it blessed me. When the eye saw, then it approved me. And so here is Job's life in his community, a place of privilege and honor. He's a leader. He is a judge. And I love the way he describes that. When he entered a room, what did the young men do? They hid from him. Now, they weren't afraid of him. It was a sign of respect. They cleared the room, is what they did. When Job came in, the young men left. The older men, what did they do? They stood up. They were sitting in whatever chairs they had, and Job would walk in the room. All of the aged men would stand up. What about the nobles and the princes? They shut their mouths. They may have been, there may have been a lot of talk going on. The room may be roaring. Job walks in. Everybody shuts their mouths. That's honor and that's respect. And that's what Job, that's what he had before the calamity came upon him. They did this not only because of Job's wisdom. They did it because of Job, out of respect for Job's goodness, his righteousness as well. He says that the ear heard and blessed, the eye saw and approved. He says the reason for that is, verse 12, because I delivered the poor who cried out, the fatherless and the one who had no helper. The blessing of a perishing man came upon me, and I caused the widow's heart to sing for joy. I put on righteousness, and it clothed me. My justice was like a robe and a turban. I was eyes to the blind, and I was feet to the lame. I was a father to the poor, and I searched out the case that I did not know. I broke the fangs of the wicked and plucked the victim from his teeth. Here was a man who was a champion of those who were outcast. The orphan would cry out, and Job was Johnny on the spot, there to help him in whatever way that he could. The widow would cry out. Job was concerned about them. So Job wasn't one of these kind of fellows who walked around with his nose in the air. You know, I'm a wealthy guy. I have this great prestige, this great honor. I don't need to associate with the riffraff. Job wasn't that kind of a man. Job, in his wealth and in his honor, was concerned about those who were indigent, about those who needed help, and he was sure to help them. And notice, as a judge, he said, I like the way he put it in verse 15, he was eyes to the blind and feet to the lame. He came to the aid of those who needed his help in judgment. Even the person, he said, that was unfamiliar to him. The last part of verse 16. I searched out the case that I did not know. Job didn't take for granted that he just knew everything. He didn't come into a judgment situation thinking that he knew what what everything was about in this situation. He was humble enough to know that there were some things that he needed to check out. And he said, if I didn't know the situation, I'd check out. I would search diligently for the answer. What was upmost in Job's mind was that he be a perfectly righteous judge. And he worked hard to try to do that. So he's blessed with wealth. He's blessed with honor. He is blessed with the kind of heart that men would respect. And begin verse 18 through 20. He says, I didn't think that would ever end. The honor, the respect, the wealth. It was so entrenched, and he knew that God had given it to him because of the way that Job was, and Job knew that he had not changed at all. And if God is showering these blessings on him in the way that he is living his life, and as a reward to him for his righteousness, and he continues to be righteous, why does he think that would ever change? And I said, I shall die in my nest and multiply my days as the sand. My roof is spread out to the waters, and the dew lies all night on a branch. My glory is fresh within me, and my bow is renewed in my hand. Things just get better and better and better. One day gives way to the next, and the next day is just more blessings from God. Why should that ever end? And so he says, I was comfortable in my wealth. I was comfortable in the honor that was given to me. I didn't think those things would ever end. verses 21 through 25, he again talks about the wisdom that he had and the honor that was bestowed upon him because of his wisdom. He said, men listened to me and waited and kept silence for my counsel. After my words, they did not speak again, and my speech settled on them as dew. They waited for me as for the rain, and they opened their mouth wide as for the spring rain. If I mocked at them, they did not believe. The light of my countenance they did not cast down. I chose the way for them and sat as chief. So I dwelt as a king in the army, as one who comforts mourners. I think these verses are particularly poignant in contrast to chapter 26, verses 1 through 4. Right after Bildad's last speech, Job answers him and he says, how have you helped him who is without power? How have you saved the arm that has no strength? How have you counseled one who has no how have you counseled one who has no wisdom? And how have you declared sound advice to many? To whom have you uttered words? And whose spirit came from you? I think he's in, as we noted last week, in those first 4 verses of chapter 26, his question is, who do you think you're talking to here? You know, you're saying these simpleton kinds of things. You're saying things that are very basic, but are of no help whatsoever in my situation. You are answering questions that have not been asked, and you're not answering the questions that have been asked. And so I think what he says in chapter 26 is, you're treating me like I'm an idiot. And I think in contrast to that, I think especially he wants to make that point in verses 21 through 25. Used to be, if I said something, nobody talked back. If I made a claim, nobody questioned it. If I had truths to present, nobody contradicted those things. And all Job has had since he went through this situation is question after question after question posed at him, argument after argument after argument. And what he says is, there was a day and time when none of you 3 guys would have talked to me like you're talking to me now. And what a great disappointment that was. And when you think about what Job is going through at this time, I knew a guy who had type 1 diabetes, and his pancreas was shot. And he struggled with life. His whole life was a struggle. Thin as a rail, never very active at all. He went in and he had to have surgery. I forget what it was that they were doing, the main thing. But he also got a pancreas transplant, which meant what? He's not diabetic anymore. And I remember him telling me after a year or so, he said, you know, I never realized how bad I felt until I compared it with how I feel now. I never realized I was sick until I was able to be healthy. The reverse of that with Job. And how much more this situation must have hurt him, especially the dishonor that has been shown to him because he was a man who knew great honor. He knew what it was for men to stand up when he entered the room. He knew what it was for him to say something and no one dare talk back to him. And that is all he has been getting from these men. They have maligned him. They have accused him of things that are not true, all in an attempt to try to figure out why it is that God has come against him. And it hurts. It hurts because he knew what it was to be a man who no one would ever do that to. And as we begin chapter 30, let me catch up here on this thing. Read fast. And that last point there, what a difference this is from the way Job's three friends have treated him. What a difference in the way that it used to be. Yes?
They knew him before.
Yes.
So how did they have the audacity to do what they were doing?
Yeah. Well, I think you see a person in this situation and perhaps you draw some conclusions. And one conclusion is maybe we didn't know him as well as we thought we did. And that's basically what they have accused him of. We thought we knew you. We thought you were a righteous guy. But clearly, you've been pulling the wool over our eyes, because this would have never happened to you if you were what we thought you were. And I think what Job is saying is, I was what you thought I was. And the way I was being treated before, the honor and the respect that I had, it was right for me to have those things because I was a genuinely good and righteous person. Yes, sir, Joe.
I think what they were doing was called retribution theology, which I didn't know what it was, but I looked it up.
Explain it.
It's, how do I say this? You can tell by what happens to a person, whether they're righteous or not.
Yeah.
The good will be punished. The good will be treated well.
The bad will be punished. Yeah.
Which is not true.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which this shows.
Yeah.
Jones.
Yeah. This is pure retribution theology. It started out that way, that God doesn't punish good people. God doesn't bless bad people. You're being punished, so that means you're bad. That's yeah. And when you start out at that point, the if-then argument, and if your if is wrong, if God truly only blesses the righteous, only curses the wicked, if that is false, then most likely every conclusion you come to after that is going to be false as well. Okay, that's chapter 29. Chapter 30 is the comparison. What life is for Job now. And man, has life changed for Job. It has done a total 180 on him. What did the young men used to do when he entered the room? They hid from him. They ran out of respect for him. Listen to what they do now. But now they mock at me, men younger than I, whose fathers I disdain to put with the dogs of my flock. He wouldn't even let them keep the dogs of his sheep flocks, their fathers. That's how worthless their fathers were. And his point is, you're the next generation of that, these young men who are mocking him. Indeed, what profit is the strength of their hands to me? Their vigor has perished. They are gaunt from want and famine, fleeing late to the wilderness, desolate and waste, who pluck mallow by the bushes and broom tree roots for their food. They are driven out from among men. They shouted at them as a thief. They had to live in the clefts of the valleys, in caves of the earth and the rocks. Among the bushes they brayed, under the nettles they nested. They are sons of fools, yes, sons of vile men. They are the scourge of the land. And so he is describing here the young men of lowest estate in us. And they were low men. They were vile, wicked, filthy individuals. So much so that they had been cast out of civilized society. Where are they living? In cliffs and caves. Have there been cavemen? You're reading about some of them right here. And, when I read this, I wondered, some of those cave-dwelling folks that, they find these caves and people have lived in them. And, this surely it was 30 or 40,000 years ago. No, in Job's time, there were cavemen. And they were that because their vileness had led them to that. Their wickedness had led them to that. They're living in caves. They're gaunt. They're just scavengers who eat stuff that has no nourishment to it whatsoever. And so they are just pretty much, if you can say about anybody, they're just pretty much the scum of the earth. And there is nobody lower than them, except they find somebody who's now lower than them. And what do? They mock him. Men who are worthless mocking somebody because they believe that as worthless as they are, he is even more worthless than them. Rather than bemoaning what has happened to him, now they're ridiculing and mocking. He goes on in verse 9, and now I am their taunting and song. Yes, I am their byword. They make up songs about him and taunt him with those little songs that are, and those sayings that are, they're designed to just twist the knife that Job has in him. They abhor me. They keep far from me. Now they're kind of backing off when in the presence of Job, not because they honor him, but because they are just sick of him. He is more filthy in their minds than they are. They do not hesitate to spit in my face. There is nothing more despicable that you could do to a man in the Middle East than to spit in his face. The spitting that was done to Jesus, that was calculated to be the most cruel thing that they could think of. Crueler than a scourging would have been to spit in a man's face. And that's what they are doing to him. And he says in verse 11 that the reason for this is because God has loosed the bowstring on him. This contrasts with chapter 29 and verse 20. My bow is renewed in my hand. This is what he was saying when things were going well. The bow just, it just kept getting tighter and tighter and stronger and stronger. And he says, now God has loosed the bowstring. And these guys are eating it up. At my right hand, the rabble rises. The right hand is the place of honor. Not only do they not hide from him, not only do they flee in his presence, they approach him on his honorable side, on the side of the greater. They push away my feet. I think what he's saying there is they're tripping him. He walks by, they stick out their foot, and they trip him to see him fall, so they can make fun of him. And they raise against me their ways of destruction. Whatever they can think to do that'll add to his misery, they are doing it. So you can see this rabble of young, worthless men who are, poking sticks at him and tripping him and making fun of him and singing taunts about him and all of this. Just a despicable display. Even if Job was suffering because he had done something for which God was punishing him, this would still be a despicable thing to do to a person. They break up my path. They promote my calamity. They have no helper. They come as broad breakers. Under the ruinous storm, they roll along. Terrors are turned upon me. They pursue my honor as wind, and my prosperity has passed like a cloud. They are just a tumult against him. And what I think we see pictured here in verse 14 is a break in a wall where water comes rushing in and you can't stop it, that kind of thing. Or an army that finally makes a break in a wall, and they come pouring in and nothing can stop it. And it's just a horrifying scene to those who they are coming to get. And he says, that's what's happening here. It is unrelenting. There's nothing Job can do to stop these wicked people from doing the things to him that they are doing. And so his life he's terrorized by this. And in verses 16 through 19, he says it's just more than I can take. My soul is poured out because of my plight. The days of affliction take hold of me. My bones are pierced in me at night. My gnawing pains take no rest. By great force my garment is disfigured. It binds me about as a collar of my soul, of my coat, I'm sorry. He has cast me into the mire, and I have become like dust and ashes. He says, body and soul. He is just pretty much less than human now. He has more in common with dust and ashes than he has with fellow human beings. What a horrible situation that he is in. And in verses 20 through 23, then, he cries out to God. He says, I'm nothing but dust and ashes. I'm lower than dust and ashes. He cries out to God. I cry out to you, but you do not answer me. I stand up, and you regard me. And get to where I want to be here. There we go. He is expressing his confusion. Not only about why this affliction has come upon him, but why, when he cries out to God for an answer to why this is happening, why God does not answer. he says, I stand up and you regard me. I think that's a judicial term there. The idea is that he stands up, kind of pleading for judgment, if you will. And God sees him, but God will not answer him. You lift me up to the wind and cause me to ride on it. He's riding a storm. You spoil my success. For I know that you will bring me to death into the house appointed for all living. He knows where or he's at least fairly sure where this is going to end. It's going to end with God killing him. There's nothing really left for God to do. God has destroyed his body. God has destroyed his soul. Nothing left for God to do but kill him. Yes, sir.
Did you skip 21 on purpose?
You become cruel to me? Yeah, I did. Thank you for noticing that, Joe. The idea of cruel there, it could be that in a non-sinful way.
Well, I want to say,
Yeah.
he didn't sin, but boy,
Yeah.
he gets pretty close.
Yeah.
Accusing God.
That idea of cruel can also mean fierce or severe. If he is accusing God of cruelty, I would say he's not accusing God of, shall we say, sinful cruelty.
Yeah.
What he's saying is, you have severely, fiercely come against me. And it is cruel to Job. And then in verses 24 through 26, well, I guess through verse 29, he has cried out, but God will not help him, and man will not help him. Surely he would not stretch out his hand against a heap of ruins if they cry out when he destroys it. God wouldn't even, if you had this pile of rocks out here, and the pile of rocks were crying out to God, God would notice them and answer them. He said, I am worse than a pile of rocks to God. God won't even show me what he would, in his goodness, show a pile of rocks. And then in verses 25 and 26, have I not wept for him who is in trouble? Has not my soul grieved for the poor? When I looked for good, evil came to me. He says, I did all of these wonderful, I saw the poor person. I came to his aid. I heard the cries of the fatherless, and I came to their aid. And yet now nobody will come to my aid. Nobody listens to me. Verse 28, I go about mourning, but not in the sun. I stand in the assembly and cry out for help. I am a brother of jackals and a companion of ostriches. If you've ever heard jackals or ostriches, it's a haunting, kind of a mourning, haunting sound that they make. And he says, that's the way I'm crying out, and nobody cares. Nobody listens. To people, I'm just a jackal's cry or an ostrich howl. Yes, sir.
There's got to be some kind of lesson we can learn from this attitude that he's showing. He expresses his confusion over why God has afflicted him, and God has refused to answer his pleas. We need to take this and kind of look at how we handle when stumbling blocks come in our way. He's blaming everybody, but he's even blaming God. God would not do to rubble what he's done to me. That to me he's very desperate but he just doesn't get it. He doesn't get what God is or what God does. Maybe this is why he has been afflicted, because he needed to learn that lesson.
No, it's nothing on Job. Job is crying out, and you're right, he doesn't get it. And that's what he's been saying since chapter 3. I don't get it. And his friends have been saying, well, let us explain it to you. And so they give it a shot, and his answer is, I still don't get it. From chapter 3 to chapter 31, Job doesn't get it. And the reason he doesn't get it is because he doesn't have the insight that we have. Imagine if chapters 1 and 2 weren't in Job. And it started at chapter 3, and we have this guy that's going through this state of humiliation and agony, and we hear these arguments that these men are making. I suspect we would probably make the same arguments that they were making. You know, Job, what in the world did you do that caused God to come at you like this? Job's answer is, he's come at me, and I have no idea why. That's why he is so confused, because he gets God. He doesn't get the situation. And there is a sense in which God is treating him kind of less than rubble. And that's, I don't think God holds it against Job for saying that. Because Job's point is not God's a bad God. Job's point is God's a good God, and I just don't understand why my good God is treating me like this. Yes, sir?
It appears to me that in chapter 1, verse 22, Job doesn't think he's treating him unfairly. But then in chapter 30, verse 11 and 19, it seems he does think he's treating him unfairly.
Chapter 1 and verse 22.
Yeah, I believe that's right.
The idea of God, Job did not sin or charge God with wrong. Is that what you're talking about there? And up in verse 21, the Lord gave and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord.
It's in verse 22.
Yeah, and both of those are statements of Job's. Job is not willing to attack God and accuse God of doing him wrong. Wrong has been done, and that's Job's whole point. The God who does no wrong has brought wrong upon me. And you know what? That's true. Job is suffering wrongly, and God has allowed it. We know why. God has a good reason for it. We know the reason. Job and his 3 friends did not. Yes, sir?
I think you have to keep in mind God's statement in chapter 1 to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job?" I think God is saying, I know this man, I know the quality of man that he is and the righteousness that he possesses. And I'm comfortable with allowing him to be subjected to these things because I think he can
Well, he knew.
endure it.
He knew Job would not curse him.
Yeah.
He knew.
Yeah.
He knew that.
Yeah, God wasn't, in a sense, God wasn't testing.
But still,
God knew. Yeah,
because of that, he
yeah,
punishes it. Does that seem fair to Job?
yeah. In our minds, no, it doesn't seem fair. because we're not tuned that way.
And he did reward him at the end,
Yeah, yeah,
but Job didn't know that at the
yeah.
time.
And it doesn't seem fair to Job at this time. But again, the important point is, how does Job deal with what seems to be unfair treatment from God? He refuses to say that means God is bad.
Right.
He just doesn't know what it means. But he knows that it doesn't mean that he serves an unrighteous God, an unloving God. Chapter 31, which is, I've got to get 3 chapters a week, and I'm not going to keep you here another 30 minutes to get through chapter 31. I'll let you read that on your own. It's if-then statements. If I've done anything, and he goes through this laundry list of things, if I've committed adultery, if I've stolen from people, if I have overlooked the weak, and on, if I've committed idolatry, all of this, then yeah, I deserve everything I'm getting and more. But his point is, I haven't done that. And at the end of chapter 31, he repeats that plea that he could stand before the judgment throne of God. He makes his list of things that he says, I have not done. And he says, I set my mark on it. He signs it. And he says, I wish that God kept a record, that he had a book with a record of my life in it, and that he would give it to me. He said, I would bring that record book into my trial, because he knows that record book would show exactly the kind of person that Job has been, the righteous person that he has been. So he knows that his affidavit and God's affidavit together, no one would be able to accuse him of wrong. And if the land did, the land would be wrong. And the land would see that it is wrong. And with that, Job closes his argument. There's nothing left to say. I'm suffering. I don't know why I'm suffering. It doesn't seem just to me that I am suffering. I've done nothing that would be worthy of this, and that's it. Nothing left for Job to say, nothing left for his friends to answer. And so I ask, bear with me just a minute. Conversation ends. Who won it? Stalemate. You get through 31 chapters of Job, and nobody has convinced anybody of anything. Job is just as sure of his righteousness. These men are just as sure of his unrighteousness. And there's going to be a young guy named Elihu who's evidently been listening to all of this, and he's just had it with these old, griping men. And he's going to straighten them out beginning in chapter 32. And that's where we'll start next week. Thanks for being here. Go to God in prayer, and we'll be dismissed. Gracious Father, we're thankful for the day, for the blessings of life that you have given to us. We know that you are the God of good, even when we have things in our lives that we cannot understand. We know that whatever may come upon us, that you are with us, that you've not promised to keep us from the bad things of this world, but you have promised to see us through. We thank you that we can learn that lesson from the book of Job. We thank you for men like him who set an example of how to live righteously and suffer righteously. Father, keep us strong in our faith. Help us to overcome whatever stands in our way. Be with those who need your blessings in special ways. Bring us back on the Lord's Day is our prayer in Christ's name. Amen.